Pam here from Pam's Crafty Corner. Welcome back to my channel for another episode of Coffee, Crime, and Crafts. These are typically bi-weekly episodes where I discuss the details of a specific crime while working on a weekly craft project. Today we are going to take a trip back in time to a crime that took place right here in Newfoundland and Labrador in 1809. The coffee gods have blessed me with a dark roast coffee this evening. So easy on the caffeine, but bold in taste. I have my English paper piecing project all ready to work on. So let's get to it. So as I said, today I'm going to be working on my English paper piecing quilt top. I have several hexes that are all pre-cut and pre-basted that need to be sewn together. And because I'm not really working on a set pattern, I've decided that this is going to be a scrappy quilt, which means I get to use up all the little fabric scraps, as small as these little squares, that I've kept from some projects that I had, and fabric pieces that have been gifted to me by other friends and family. And it's a nice way to incorporate them into a project. So because I'm not really following a pattern, I am just going to start basting some pieces together today that I can then take the strip and add it to this quilt top. So it's perfect for me to work on during our little chat, so to speak. All right, so as I said in the beginning, we are going to be discussing a murder. Actually, I don't think I did say that in the beginning. I said a crime, didn't I? But the crime we're actually going to be discussing today is a double axe murder, believe it or not. And I didn't know anything as horrid as this had happened in our little province, but apparently it did. And where this crime occurred was in a very small town located just outside of Grossmoor National Park on the northern peninsula of Newfoundland and Labrador. So I'll insert a picture or two of where this is located, probably a little map if I can find a map to insert as well. So the town of Cowhead, that's what it's called nowadays, is a pretty small place. It has a current population of approximately 478 people, but its roots go way back to the early 1800s. Actually, maybe even earlier than that. It's been historically linked to shipping and trading lanes since the early 1800s that we're aware of. And although Cowhead does have a long history, it wasn't really established as a permanent settlement until later in the 1800s. Just trying to get this started here, keeping that little tail of my thread out of the way. There we go. That's better. So at one point in the history of Cowhead, it was also known as Shallow Bay, which was in the early 1800s used as a fur trapping settlement. Of course, now I've got a little knot. Wouldn't you know it? Okay, knot's all fixed. Don't know how I ended up with that, but anyway. So, as I was saying, Cowhead also used to be known as Shallow Bay. In the early 1800s, fur trading stations opened up in nearby Bon Bay, which is another small community. And in 1809, a merchant from Rocky Harbor was dealing with the Bird and Company. They hired men to maintain trapping lines in the wilderness area that was known as Shallow Bay, or Cowhead, as we'll refer to it as, I guess. So 3 of the men that got hired to work the trapping lines were Richard Cross, Joseph Randell, and John Pelly. Now, John Pelly was known locally as Old Pelly, and apparently he had hailed from Ireland at some point. There was talk that he came to Newfoundland not as a regular Irish immigrant, but as a fugitive trying to evade police in Ireland. But I really couldn't find out much about that aspect of his background. So I don't know if that was actually true or not. And there was also some mention that he ended up in Cowhead from the East Coast. So he originally landed on the east coast of Newfoundland and was living in Bay Bulls for a time, and then ended up on the Northern Peninsula. So he didn't come to work in the fishery as many of the old Irish did. He ended up working as a trapper, living for long periods by himself and spending a lot of time on his own. Okay, sorry about the jump there. I had a phone call and I finished off adding this piece, so now I'm going to add the next one. So anyway, so the 2 other trappers from this story, so we've just talked about John Pelly. The 2 other trappers from the story were from Rocky Harbor, a Richard Cross and a Joseph Randell. So these men shared a connection other than being from the same small town. They both had a relationship to Sarah Singleton, who is sometimes referred to as a Sarah Cross, but I'm just going to refer to her as Sarah Singleton. So the relationship that they had with Sarah, Richard was Sarah's brother, and Joseph was her fiance. And Sarah worked as a housekeeper for John Payne. He was the agent in Rocky Harbor who worked for Bird and Company. And he was the agent that was responsible for the trappers, such as Richard and Joseph and John Pelly. So on the morning of April 10th, 1809, Richard and Joseph left together to head out to their trapping lines in Shallow Bay. After a week had passed, neither of them had returned, nor had they sent word to say that they would be staying on later than expected. So after a week had passed and John and Sarah had not heard from either of the men, they kind of became a little concerned. And Sarah, who was quite worried, convinced John that they should go and look for the men, see if they could find them. So her and John snowshoed, so they left on foot and snowshoed from Rocky Harbor to Shallow Bay to check on Richard and Joseph. Now, in Shallow Bay, Joseph had a camp that he had built, almost like a logging camp or a woods camp. And that was typically where they would stay when they were working on their trapping lines. So when Sarah and John reached Joseph's camp, they were a little perplexed to find this other guy, John Pelly, residing in Joseph's cabin. So when they asked Pelly about, Richard and Joseph, Pelly said that he hadn't seen Richard at all, but that he had passed Joseph the day before. And they had exchanged a few words, and Joseph then went off into the woods. Pelly believed that Joseph went off to check his trap lines, but he swore that Joseph had never returned back to the cabin. Didn't see him after. And John Pelly was acting pretty oddly. So Sarah became suspicious. She said, something's just not right. It was late in the day when Sarah and John Payne had arrived at the cabin. So they told Pelly that they would stay the night and then leave early in the morning to search for Richard and Joseph. Now, there are a couple of versions of what transpired after this point, and the truth is a little hard to determine when you're covering a story from a very small rural town that happened, 2 centuries ago. Actually, more than 2 centuries ago now. So, in version 1, after they told John Pelly that they were going to be staying the night at the cabin, Pelly began to drink moonshine in the cabin that night. And he basically drank himself into an intoxicated stupor. I'm trying to avoid a knot here. Hang on. There we go. So he drank himself into an intoxicated stupor. Once he passed out, John Payne went outside to fetch more wood for the fire. When he returned, he told Sarah that he found a pile of belongings as well as a set of snowshoes outside. She identified the items as belonging to her brother Richard. So while Pelly was still in a deep sleep, Sarah and John left the cabin and made their way back to Rocky Harbor to get help. Another account stated that while Pelly was outside to get more firewood, Sarah was actually arranging some of their damp clothes to dry by the stove. And it was while she was doing so that she came across a pair of mittens she had knit for her brother Richard. So when John came in from getting wood, she told him there was no way that Richard would have left without his mittens that time of year with the cold and everything. So when he came back into the cabin, the two of them together decided they weren't going to confront Pelly. Instead, they stayed the night and then left early in the morning, pretending like they were, going to look for Richard and Joseph. But in actual fact, that's when they headed back to Rocky Harbor to get help. So once back in Rocky Harbor, Sarah and John relayed everything that had happened and told other people that they were unable to locate Richard and Joseph, and they never did find any sign of them while they were there. It was decided that they would get an armed search party together, and John, along with other people from the town, returned back to camp to search for Richard and Joseph and to confront John Pelly about what he knew, because something just didn't seem to add up to Sarah and John Payne about his story. I'm just coming to this corner here, so I'm going to tie off this thread and get another hexie that I can add on to the end. So upon arrival in Cowhead, the search party located Pelly as he was getting into a boat with his gun, as well as an axe. He saw the search party approaching, and he ran into the woods toward the cabin. He was quickly apprehended by the search party, and there is some lore that suggests that John Payne threatened to shoot John Pelly if he did not surrender and tell them what had happened to Richard and Joseph. So Pelly denied harming anyone or that he had murdered anybody, which they had quickly started accusing him of. But the group wasn't convinced. So the story goes that they tied Pelly to a tree and then threatened to light him on fire if he didn't tell them the truth of what had occurred. And it was at this point that he confessed to having killed both of the men with an axe. It's not known if he did this because they were, what his motivation was behind killing them. We don't know if it was because he felt they were encroaching on his trapping lines, the area where he had set up, or if he felt that they were, on his land, which he kind of believed to be his because he had been living there, and he felt that they were invading his space. Keep wanting to catch that tail with that thread, unfortunately. So once Pelly confessed to having murdered the men, he led the search party to a spot not far from the cabin where Pelly told them to dig away the snow and the boughs that were thrown down. And it was here that they found the frozen remains of Richard and Joseph, whose skulls had obviously been struck with an axe. And lying next to the bodies was the murder weapon. So the search party gathered up John Pelly, and they took him to Rocky Harbor. He then went to Bombay, where he was held prisoner until later in the spring, when he was transported to St. John's to stand trial. So this had occurred in April of 1809, and it wasn't until September that the trial took place. September the 1st of 1809, he went on trial before Chief Justice Thomas Tremlett. Sarah Singleton and John Payne were both called as primary witnesses. By September the 5th, he was found guilty and he was sentenced to hang for the double murder on September the 15th of 1809. In an interesting twist to the story, Sarah Singleton and John Payne, they got married while they were in St. John's before they returned back to Rocky Harbor. So that's not quite where the story ends. So in 1919, over 100 years later, construction work was being done to widen the road that led from the main highway on the Northern Peninsula down to the community of Cowhead. It was at this time that the remains of the two murdered men were uncovered once more. And they were still there, buried with the axe. So the axe handle was long rotted away, but just the axe head remained. And that is now located at the Dr. Henry Payne Community Museum in Cowhead, along with a copy of the original trial transcript. The folklore surrounding this story has grown over the years, and there's actually a stage production also of this story that's called The Double Axe Murder. And you can see that at the Gross Morn Theater Festival in Cowhead during the summer months. I'm not sure if last year was the first year that was put off, but it's certainly something that I think I would enjoy to see if I was there. Well, I'm to the end of this corner, and I am to the end of this episode. That's all I've got for this episode. I hope you enjoyed the content and managed to get some work done on your own craft project this week. Please give this episode a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any upcoming content. I typically upload coffee, crime, and craft videos every second week, and I also post updated videos of my various crafts every couple of weeks or so, which I'm due to upload another one this week. If you want to help support my channel and the time it takes to research and prepare these episodes, please feel free to check out the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box down below. A coffee is always appreciated. And until next time, stay safe and enjoy crafting.